Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Quack&Co, the channel where everything is 10 minutes or less all the time, every time, and this is an often requested video that I haven't really devoted a lot of time to because, honestly, it's a short video. But that's what this channel is for. This channel is for short videos, so let's go ahead and dive into this one. This is how I house rule Zombicide. More specifically, how I house rule Zombicide Black Plague, how I take in all the amounts of content they have to produce a game experience that I personally love. This is not going to break the bank in terms of just any amazing, brilliant ideas. This is just stuff I've done over the years as I try to take what starts off as a core box of Zombicide, turns into a bunch of expansions, starts getting ridiculously over the top with more expansions that we won't even talk about, continues that process with more expansions that we won't talk about, and just ends up with too much stuff. This, by the way, is condensed Zombicide Black Plague. And Green Horde, let's be honest, a little bit of Green Horde too, but this is what happens when you condense it all into fewer boxes so that you have less to deal with, and we'll deal with all that later. The point for right now is that Zombicide Black Plague has a lot of stuff. And the more stuff you add to it, the more you have to question and ask, how am I going to run this experience? What is the Zombicide experience I'm looking for? How do I balance it, make it fun? What do I use or not use, as the case might be? So I'm going to start off from the bat with Zombicide Black Plague, the core box. You have a core box experience. It's going to have a bunch of heroes. It's going to have the various campaigns you're going through. It's going to have two vault weapons. That's it. No interesting or extra abominations. No interesting or extra necromancers. Just the core stuff. The good news is the experience it gives you is exactly what the experience is supposed to be. The bad news is that experience is far from ideal and should get better quickly. So let's start with the vault weapons. You're going to start getting more vault weapons. As you start adding more to your Zombicide collection, you'll get more vault weapons, and that's plain and simple. Use and mix and match the vault weapons however you want. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. Also, there's an issue with the starting weapons. The more Zombicide you add, the more of a disconnect you'll have between characters who have their preferred starting weapon. All the characters come with a little thing over here saying, not really starting weapon, a dagger, so to speak. They come with a little, like, this slot may hold a dagger. Characters all have that on their board. You can ignore that. You can. It might feel like you're breaking the game a bit, but honestly, the degree of impactfulness that spot has, where you can no longer have a piece of armor, instead you can have a certain gear, item, piece of weapon, spell, whatever it is, the amount of impact that has had on my personal Zombicide experience is so little to the point that don't worry about mixing and matching that. Shuffle whatever gear together that you want. It's all good. Now, you do want to be mindful of some of the degrees of overlap in gear. You might have overlap in starting weapons, overlap in other weapons, overlap in tons of things. As you add various content, various boxes, pick and choose the items you want. Don't worry about balance so much. I find with items, whatever you add, whatever you take out, it'll all be fine. That's going to be true for starting weapons too. You might find, well, now we have 2 strength 2 weapons. Well, use them or don't, depending on the degree of balance you want. I generally like having no more than 2 strength 2 weapons, sometimes even only 1 strength 2 weapon to start you off once you're using the starting weapons. So I try to minimize that. I try to minimize the amount you have of those in order to make sure that the starting balance of the game is not that everyone can just take out fatties left, right, and center. Again, small notes there. Heroes are a pretty easy one. Add in as many heroes as you want. As many as you want. Have fun with it. Enjoy the heroes to whatever degree you want. It's all cool. It's all easy. But there are some heroes that are game-breaking. There are some heroes that have stronger abilities. There are some heroes that can start the game off with the ability to take out abominations off the bat. Taking out abominations should not be something that's easy in this game. This game is not balanced around easy abominations killed. This game is balanced around abominations chasing you around the board until eventually you find something that manages to take them out. That means there should be a degree of build-up. There should be a degree of, I can't deal with this thing yet. I have to run away for now until later. That does mean that you could still use various characters. There are characters who have this. You can still use them, but you want to stack the deck further against you. We haven't talked about difficulty modifications yet. We'll do so shortly. But when you add heroes that are game-breaking, if you want the game to be fun, stack the deck against you. This is going to be true across the board. There are various tips and tricks and things you can do to make the game harder, and constantly play with that. Make it easier when you can, make it harder when you can. Play with the balance that results in the game experience you want, but it's very easy to play with the balance. There's a few ways, we'll get into that shortly. As far as Necromancers, I don't mess with the Necromancer distribution at all in Zombicide Black Plague. I've tried it. I've done so in the past. I have found that messing with the Necromancer distribution makes the game not fun for me. I have to double check the exact count. I think there's generally around 6 Necromancers in the deck. Maybe if you're adding more cards, we'll talk about that more. Maybe if you're adding more cards, add a few more Necromancers. I find adding too many Necromancers doesn't just make the game harder, it makes it less fun. The constant chase of the Necromancers means I can't pursue the goals, and I don't enjoy that process quite as much, so I don't really mess with the Necromancer distribution that much, with a caveat. We'll get to the caveat shortly. What I do is I roll a die whenever a Necromancer card is drawn. I have a separate stack of all the special Necromancers I have, all the Kickstarter extras, all the expansions, all the things. I have a separate stack of all the Necromancer extras I have, and whenever we roll a die, on a 1 to 3 it is a normal Necromancer, on a 4, 5, or 6 it is a special Necromancer, and we draw a card from the side Necromancer deck, which determines which special Necromancer it is. That results in you having to not mess with the core deck, but you have the variability of having special Necromancers enter the game. I do the same thing with Abominations. A 1 to 3 is a regular Abomination, a 4, 5, or 6 is a special Abomination. Again, that results in me not having to overly mess with the Abomination deck with the Spawn deck, but having that when an Abomination pops out, we're going to find out if it's something special or not, again drawn from its own separate special Abomination deck. The part where I do add more Necromancers is if you have enough stuff that you're adding a ton of cards here, and if you're not removing cards. Meaning if you know Zombicide, in general, the lower cards, the numbers 1 through 40 whatnot, tend to be a bit easier. 1 through 20 are the easiest, 1 through 40 are a little easier, and then it gets harder and harder the higher the numbers go. Which means one of the ways you can tailor the experience is by removing some of the lower difficulty cards. If you're doing that, and you're adding in Flocks of Crows, Murder of Crows, or Deadeye Walkers, if you're adding in all those other things, then the balance of the deck works out and I keep the Necromancer distribution the same. If you're not doing that, if you're just slowly piling up the deck thicker and thicker and thicker with more and more types of cards, then sure, adding a special Necromancer or card to the main deck is not a problem, and this is what I always do with Abominations. This video is not as short as I thought it would be. Abominations in general, I will always add a ton of Abominations to the deck. A ton is a relative amount. My go-to number is usually 3, tailored by plus or minus depending on who's playing, the experience I want, whether we have any overpowered characters. What I do is, in addition to the regular Abomination cards, I'll take 3 random Abominations from my special deck that's set aside, without even knowing what they are, and I'll shuffle 3 of them into the Abomination deck. You can mess with that number how you want, which means I have certain specific Abominations that will be popping out when you least expect them, just as extra Abominations. And yes, they can happen way too early in the game. They absolutely will happen. But other times, you're just drawing the regular Abominations and rolling that specific die. So if I draw this giant rat thingy and I just draw his card, he's spawning. If I spawn a regular Abomination, I roll the die in a 4, 5, or 6, I might still spawn the giant rat. That may still happen. We'll find out. We'll see what happens over there. Other things you can do to modify, and again, mess with that number as you will. Mess with it. Adjust it. 3's too much, make it 2. 3's too little, make it 5. Play with that number and see the balance that results in a tough experience for you that is not too tough. And again, remember to modulate that around the specific characters you're choosing. The last thing I'll note is spawn points. Spawn points and or custom rules. Spawn points in general is something that I tend to throw into the game a lot when I'm trying to adjust the difficulty. When I'm playing an easy map and I want to play the map layout, but I don't like easy, I'll add in a spawn point. When I'm playing a medium map, I'll add in a spawn point. You have to, again, balance around the players, balance around the experience, and be mindful of how many Abominations you're already throwing in, but throwing in a spawn point can be a huge factor of adding to the difficulty, but you have to know when to do that. That is a big deal, and you want to take it seriously because it can absolutely completely overbalance the scenario. You can also make up custom rules. It's not so hard. Hey, here's a red spawn point, but when the first Abomination appears, it's inactive. You can play with stuff like that. You can play with little things that pace with the game in different ways that give you a little bit more control over the experience while giving you, well, more control over the experience. And lastly, I'll say, as far as the various extras that I like, my go-to core, and I will adjust my Zombicide experience after this, but my go-to core for Zombicide is the runners, the fatties, the walkers, all the basic zombies, all the Abominations and Necromancers I just told you, and then the wolves and the Deadeye Walkers. The wolves and the Deadeye Walkers, to me, are essential components of the Zombicide experience. I don't use the NPCs like ever. Some of the various other things are rats and mists and all dragons, all those other stuff make their way into my game here and there. But to me, those 5 zombie types are the core zombie experience. Those wolves keep you on your toes the entire time. Those Deadeye Walkers make sure that you cannot look down a hallway without worrying about being shot. They add so much to the balance, the struggle, the challenge of the experience in a way that I find so rewarding. To me, the core Zombicide experience are those 5 zombie types, a chunk of heroes, and a chunk of Abominations to make sure you have some variety there. And from there, wander into the dungeon, shoot some arrows from the tower, do what you need to do to try to survive. Zombicide is a game that is incredibly modular, and you could make it the experience you want. This is just the ways I've made it the experience that I want. I've made it challenging enough that every time I walk into it, I don't know if I'm going to live or die, and I have to tactically plan around how to deal with the wolves, how to deal with the archers, and how to just try to survive. And just as often, I don't. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Quack&Co. I hope you found this video helpful. It's not the ending. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Quack&Co, where less time watching means more time playing.